Welcome back to the program. We're discussing the current challenges faced by Native Americans. Joining us from Minnesota is its former governor, Jesse Ventura. Joining us from New York is Simon Moya-Smith. He is an indigenous rights activist. Governor Ventura, there are two major Native American groups in Minnesota, the Dakotas and the Anishinaabe, as well as many others, of course, living in multiple reservations. During your time in office, what were the issues that they raised with you, and how did you manage them?
Well, one of the big issues is, of course, is Minnesota, all the Native American areas now have their own casinos. And, you know, the casinos are very, very profitable. They did this with agreement with the state. The state signed off on it. And now people are all irritated because they see the casinos making this money, so they want to have casinos off the reservation now. They want to have a casino in downtown Minneapolis. They want to build stadiums using casino money and all this. And I'll tell you a great story. We have 7 tribes in Minnesota with 7 different leaders, and I met with all 7 chiefs, heads of the tribes. And because I had a proposal to legalize sports betting to pay for all these stadiums. I couldn't get one legislator eventually to carry the bill, and it's a $3 billion a year industry under the table in Minnesota, sports betting. Let that build stadiums. I went to the Native Americans with this proposal saying, does it inflict upon you if we were to legalize sports betting to build these stadiums for football? All 7 of the leaders said, Governor, we give you our blessing. It's a different gambler. We hope you're successful. So I had a way to please both sides. They got to keep their casinos, which they're entitled to through agreements made. We don't have to break another treaty with them. And we would achieve what we wanted by going after a different gambler, the sports bettor, to build the stadium. Unfortunately, I wasn't successful at it. I couldn't even get one Democrat or Republican to even carry the bill for me. And you can't, you know, how are you going to get it if you don't have one of them doing it for you? But I had the blessing of the Native American community in Minnesota as a way to, you know, where both sides would be happy. And I think that's what good politics is supposed to be.
Simon, when we look at casino operations, we have some figures here. The latest figures we have, they're pretty old, though. $19.4 billion raised in 2005. That's according to the Harvard Project on American Indian Economic Development. 300,000 jobs generated in that same review. Do these casinos help or hurt Native Americans?
I guess that depends on the Native American nation, and I think that's really important for people to understand that the Seminole Nation, or the Seminole Tribe of Florida, they have a very prosperous casino, but that's not the Oglala Lakotas of Pine Ridge, South Dakota. So it's the difference in nations. So I think it's great in some respects for jobs, but it also perpetuates the stereotypes of Native Americans basically being, you know, insular and making money for ourselves. And I mean, why not? It's really important that Native Americans have the money to rebuild the schools or have money for our communities. But at the same time, when it comes to casinos themselves, there is some sort of problematic geographical problem when it comes to the casino in Pine Ridge versus Florida. Because if you're in Florida, you're going to be really profitable, but if you're an isolated reservation, you're not going to get a lot of foot traffic, and that's pretty difficult for a lot of the nations.
Governor, you want to say?
Yeah, well, I'd like to throw something in, something that entered my head. We see today how many of the states are legalizing marijuana now. We're up to about 4 or 5 now. And I always wondered why the Native Americans didn't seek out that business. If they're their own independent country, and maybe I'm wrong on this, on their reservations, why wouldn't, I always thought it would have been a wonderful idea for the Native Americans to legalize hemp and marijuana, and it would have paved the way for what's going on now throughout the country, and it would have been another way to create jobs, because you can make paper out of it, it's medicine, it's biodiesel fuel, it makes the best on the planet. Why was it the Native Americans had to stay away from the legalization of marijuana? That always puzzled me.
Simon, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think that's because that you're looking again at a tribe by tribe, nation by nation environment, and then also sometimes weed isn't good for the nation, and the chiefs make that decision, the elders make that decision.
Okay.
And I mean, if it's good for finance, I totally understand that, but if it's not good for the community, they're going to say no to it, and especially if something like marijuana isn't traditional. So like, for example, tobacco, extremely traditional, right? But at the same time, people took tobacco, and they adulterated it. Now it's extremely bad. Everybody looks at tobacco and they're like, oh God, it's awful. No, you can't smoke. Well, for us, it's traditional. I mean, but with marijuana, it's a case-by-case situation, whether or not the elders look at it and say this is good for us or it's bad for us.
Governor, you know,
I don't know. I just always thought, how could it be bad? I mean, you know, it's out there. The plant is used, and it would have created a huge industrial market for them if they'd had the ability to do that or make that choice. I don't know. It's their call, naturally. You know, I'm not going to second guess them.
Well, yeah, but we also have to look at marijuana when it comes to the youth. I mean, there is studies to prove how it, you know, poorly affects the youth, and having that readily available on a reservation probably isn't something that's good for the kids.
Governor, you
Well,
know,
you treat it the same. You treat it the same as you do alcohol. I mean, we know alcohol's not good for kids either, but what about the medical marijuana? You don't even smoke that. That's drops under the tongue. I have an instance where I know 2 people that suffer seizure disorders. They tried 4 different seizure medicines, these powerful medicines from the pharmaceutical. It did nothing for them. They went to Colorado. They got medical marijuana, and they're virtually seizure-free today. And you don't smoke it, it's drops under the tongue.
Governor, you know, we talk about the reservations, we talk about the reservation system. In the year 2014, I mean, is that still a viable system, reservations?
I don't know. You know, I haven't studied enough to give you what would be an informed opinion on it. I wouldn't even venture to offer an explanation whether it's good, bad. I think Simon would know better than I would.
Well, let me ask Simon about that. Simon?
Yeah, reservations historically were prison camps, not unlike Auschwitz. It was a place where, and also in Canada, where they're called reserves, it was a place where the Native American was expected to die, to just be there and die off. But now they become these bastions of culture and of language, a place where you can actually go and see elders speaking their language and referring to English as the foreign language, as the illegal immigrants, as the English and the Irish, etc. I mean, that's again, that's part of the American narrative that's left out, the idea of a reservation being a prison camp. Of course, when the Japanese were interred, they were on reservations, and people totally don't know that. That's another part that's left out. The United States says, well, we have these Japanese that we want to round up. Where are we going to put them? Well, we've got reservations. Why aren't we putting them there? Let's put them there. That's another part of that.
We know. Let me interject. We know today too. We got Guantanamo. There's another reservation.
Governor, you know, when you were governor of Minnesota, I mean, were you faced with the kind of social problems on these reservations that we hear about all the time? You know, that specifically apply to Native Americans. We have things like, I'm looking at some figures here. Native American women 2.5 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than women of other racial minority groups. Atlantic Magazine reporting that Native American students receive much lower marks than their Anglo-Saxon peers in reading and math. The dropout rate is also twice the national average.
I was somewhat made aware of that. I only served 4 years, and I have to tell you quite honestly that not always Native American issues were high on the board with me. Not personally, but when you're an independent governor dealing with the Democrats and Republicans, you got a lot of priorities just to keep yourself above water so that they don't cut your legs out from underneath you, because I had 2 sets of enemies, for lack of a better term, Democrats and Republicans that both wanted my hide if they could get it. Remember, I only raised $300,000 to become governor. They raised $12 million and I won. So you can see I had my own problems to deal with, and I don't mean to avoid the question, but I just have to say it never came up that much in my 4 years in office.
Right, Simon, there we have a situation where it didn't come up because it was politics, as usual, at the top.
that's what happens when it comes to Native Americans, and especially when there's issues like you just mentioned, that Native American women are 2.5 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than women of any other race. You know, again, that's one of those things where people aren't looking at the Native American in society. They don't see that. They don't see that Native American kids have the highest dropout rate above kids of any other race, or that Native Americans between the ages of 15 and 32, I believe, are 2.5 times more likely to commit suicide. So these numbers do demand action, but when it comes to the legislature, it's like, well, we've got this, we've got that. Well, we've got issues all across the board. Let's see what we can do. So as Native Americans, you know, what we do is we try to address those in our own communities and try to work with them in our own communities. But I mean, this needs to be a joint effort, because it's not Native American women who are being only assaulted by just random men. We're talking about like white people, black people, Hispanics. I mean, they are the victims of sexual assault. So there needs to be this broad sweeping education of looking at this problem, this plague of sexual assault on Indigenous women. But again, at the state legislature, we always get pushed to the side. There's like, yeah, we'll talk about Indians later.
Governor, I have one final question, and this is not totally relevant to what we're talking about right now, but you have said that you may run as an independent candidate in the 2016 presidential election. Is that going to happen? When can we expect the announcement?
Well, at this time, I don't know if it will, but I'll tell you, they're opening the door for me. If you look at the midterm election and what was the national turnout, 36%, that means I have a 64% pool to draw from to inspire to come out and vote, which is what I did in Minnesota. The pool was only 50% because Minnesota generally leads the nation in voter turnout. But and I'm going to steal votes from the existing 36%. So they're opening the door. When I say they, the Democrats and Republicans, because they're alienating people so bad that people are ceasing to vote. They won't even do what we need to have them do, which is their civil obligation to be vigilant citizens and vote and take part to make sure this whole thing works. And so whether I do it or not, I don't know. They're certainly giving, it would be the opportune time. There's no incumbent, and I think we're going to end up with Hillary Clinton and Jeb Bush is my prediction. And if that be the case, then I wonder why we broke off from England in the first place if we have royalty governing our country, because it seems that our presidents only come out of certain bloodlines.
Well, Governor, hopefully when you make the announcement, you'll come back and talk to us here.
Well, I'll come back and talk, but please don't hold your breath. I love my life in Mexico. I live over half the year down there. I enjoy everything about Mexico, and I would have to give that up. So, you know, but then always in the back of my mind is that little voice that says to me, if not you, then who? And that's the demon I fight with.
Governor Jesse Ventura, thanks for joining us. Simon Moya-Smith in New York, thank you so much for joining us as well.